All right, Coach. Do you want to just kind of assess the game? Seems like it was kind of one of those games you get in the hole on the road. You had the schedule change, and everything kind of snowballed from there. And do you feel that's kind of a game that got away from you, or do you feel that there were points that you still could have got back in that game a little bit?
Well, we haven't had a chance to watch the film yet. We got back about 8 hours ago, so we're still just trying to recuperate a little bit. But I think really we played in that game like you'd see a team that was on the bus for 20 hours before that, and we worked really hard on Saturday to try to not allow that to be an excuse or a detriment or some piece of adversity. I mean, we didn't want to make that a big deal. But we came out and we were a little flat, and they were much more up and energetic, and so they physically manhandled us a little bit on both sides on the lines, and they were able to jump out to an early lead. I don't know if I would say at any time were we right there on the edge, but we were able to put together some drives. We just need to get some stops. We're just not. In that game, we didn't play with offense and defense cohesion, meaning that when we get a stop on defense, the offense scores, or when we get a score on offense, the defense gets a stop. We just weren't piecing that part of it together.
How about from an offensive standpoint? You mentioned the line probably had control from a defensive standpoint, but do you feel that the ground game kind of suffered because of that a little bit? Your production went down a little bit.
Yeah, and we knew that their style of defense was very aggressive, and they were going to commit a number of hats to stopping the run. So we wanted to do some things through the air to try to loosen them up, to try to pull that the second level defenders away from the line of scrimmage, to try to open up some of the run game. I think when Ali was in there, they definitely loaded the box, and we're going to take him out of our game, which opened some things up for Ben and Isaiah to have a little bit more success in the run game than Ali did. But once we start getting down by as much as we were down, it's really hard to just reestablish that run game as much as you're still trying to chase some of those points, especially there in the second quarter. So we had to get away from it a little bit, and some of the highlights were Jackson Lundin had a really good game, kind of a breakout game for him, which was good to see, not just catching the ball, but the yards after catch and things that he did. So, I mean, there's still a number of bright spots. It just was, it wasn't the perfect ending to the story of our road trip adventure. Let's put it that way.
Can you talk a little bit about that adventure and kind of the challenges of just playing on Sunday?
Yeah, it's we left early on Friday morning. We got just east of Bismarck, and we had to turn back around. They closed the interstate down. We couldn't, the buses couldn't travel. So as we got back to Bismarck, then we were able to come up with a new plan to go south. So we went down to Aberdeen through Mobridge, South Dakota. Kind of skirted the southern end of that snowstorm that was hitting. Got us into Aberdeen around 4:30 in the afternoon. We were able to, thankfully my wife was doing a lot of work because she got us set up with a hotel and food and everything once we got to Aberdeen, and so we were really lucky there. And then once we got on the road on Saturday, leaving Aberdeen, the highway was closed down from Aberdeen, and for some reason they let the buses go, but they pulled all the smaller cars off the highway, and it was solid ice. But by the time we got to the Minnesota border, there was no snow. The roads were perfect. I mean, so we just had to get there for everything to clear up. But then, we eventually got into Rochester on Saturday night about 7:30 at night, and we left Aberdeen at 10. So it was a long trip, and then we're still an hour away from Winona, so we still had to travel that early on Sunday morning.
How about coming up this week now? You get Concordia St. Paul at home, so no travel for you this time. How do you feel about the matchup?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good that we don't have any travel, but we still have the ramifications of our travel. So getting back early this morning really kind of throws a wrench into our normal schedule. So we're gonna have to adjust some things with our guys to make sure they have enough recovery time. It was a pretty physical game, so I want to make sure that they have some ample time to do that. But then again, we also have to get back to work, and we got to flush this last game as quickly as we can out of our system, and look forward to Concordia coming up here. They've been playing well. So it's going to be a good challenge for us, a different challenge by far, but definitely a good one.
Do you know what they bring with them? Do they throw the ball out a little bit or run it, or how do you?
No, I mean they're pretty balanced. I not looking at the stats, just watching film. Everything goes through their quarterback. He's a pretty dynamic runner. So I think he's their leading rusher, and the things that he can do on the ground, you have to account for with the quarterback run game, which can be somewhat of a headache, and they spread you out with 3 or 4 wide receivers as they do that run game. So you can't pack the box just to stop the run, or else you got one-on-one matchups on the outside. So once we really get a chance to dissect it, we'll have a better feeling of how we want to defend that. But their story is their defense. They've got a great defensive end. I think he had 4 or 5 sacks this last weekend. Their defense in total had 14 sacks against Moorhead. There's some definite things we have to be aware of. We definitely don't want to get stuck behind the chains against these guys, because they're gonna come after the quarterback pretty hard, and so we've got to do some things to make sure that we protect, and then that we can try to alleviate that pressure that their defense can put on you.
How much did you just have to be a motivator this week after the rough week that you came off of?
Yeah, it was kind of started up on Saturday night and Sunday morning. We're trying to be that motivator, trying to get them up. I think the guys were excited when we turned around. It was up and down emotionally as we were driving on Friday, because we were hitting the storm, then we were called back off the road thinking the game's going to be canceled. And then midway back to Minot, we turned back around and say the game's back on. And, the guys were excited for that. But it's for a football team, you don't normally travel 2 days prior. So that was a whole different ball of wax of what we had to do on the fly. But I think motivation will be good. You tend to get a chance to lick your wounds, and with a long bus drive, you get that opportunity, and you can see probably about halfway through that drive where they started to bounce back mentally. Where they just we're finally flushing that loss out of the system. So I don't think that'll be very difficult. And just with our short week, we don't really have time to focus on that last game anymore. Anyways, we just have to move on. And like I said, when we flush it, we don't have time to even watch it with our guys. We just have to move on and start worrying about the next guy. So I don't think there'll be any extra motivation that we have to do. I think they'll be ready to kind of bounce back.
Coach, you've won 2 games so far this year. You only won 1 last year. You're having quite a few impactful freshmen, sophomores. What does that mean for your program now and for future recruiting?
Yeah, I know that we're doing the right thing on the recruiting trail. How we're doing it is definitely working for us. We're targeting the right kind of people to be in our program. Obviously, you want great football players, but you also want to have great character people too, and there's so much more that goes into it. So the class we just signed this last year, we've got so many of those kids are already playing for us. Ali Mohammed and Isaiah Bigby are probably 2 of the bigger names that kind of pop out. Corey Kerrigan, and those kids are. The great thing is they don't really know who we're playing every week. There's no predisposed mindset of, well, that team's really good or that team's really bad. They're just going to go out and play, and their energy is like a shot of adrenaline to the rest of the team. And they make big plays, and they do really good things, and each one of them is very accountable. So if they make a mistake, they're going to be the first ones to fess up to the problem that they had or their error, and they bounce back. They're very mature, and so now we just need to continue to grow with those kids and getting all these games under their belt as true freshmen. When you finally get to be a junior, senior dominated team like a lot of these teams that we're playing, our juniors and seniors will now have 30 games under their belt, and then I think that's going to bode really well. It's just it's not an overnight quick fix. It's definitely a process, but the good thing is we got the right kids in there to get that process moving.